In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how I would recommend drawing the lips. For your first drawing, I would suggest drawing lips from the front angle because it's probably the easiest. So that's what I'm going to show you and demonstrate how I would go about that. If you were drawing lips from a different angle, like slightly sideways or something like that, I would probably I'd follow the similar steps, but obviously without the line of symmetry in my drawing. So first thing I would do is just draw up some guides just as a help at this point. So I'm going to start with a horizontal line. Don't worry too much about it being perfectly straight, but you just want it as a guide as to put your mouth on. It's not going to be any line that's going to appear in this drawing, it's just there as a guide at this point. I'm going to straighten it slightly because it's going downhill a bit, and if my line's going downhill then my lips will end up going downhill slightly, so I'm just going to draw that bit in again. It's a bit better. Okay, so that's my guideline. I'm also going to draw a vertical line, and that's going to be my line of symmetry, okay? Because the lips generally are fairly symmetrical, okay? So even though some lips might be slightly off in some people's faces, if I was to draw a line of symmetry down the middle, this part here would pretty much be a mirror image of this part here. If I drew a line down the middle, obviously if you can see teeth, the middle of the two front teeth should be right in the middle of that line. If the distance between the middle of my mouth and the outer corner should be exactly the same on both sides. Okay, so it's important to start with a line of symmetry. It will help you. Now, so that's a starting point. This is just guidelines. These are not going to be any part of my finished drawing. So a starting point might be, you could start with the top of the lips. Because the mouth's slightly open, I'm going to start with this bit here, and then I'll probably move into the top lip and then the bottom lip. So as I've said in previous demonstrations, the most important thing when you're drawing is to have your reference in front of you and right in front of you like I've got here. So you're looking at it all the time. So don't make sure it's not over to one side or something like that, because what will happen is you'll start drawing what you think the lips should look like rather than what they actually look like, and then your drawing won't be very accurate. And that's what we're trying to aim for here. So I'm going to start with this bit here, and there's a little crease in there as well, so I want to try and put that in, and it's pretty much on that center line, but it's just over to the, it's just sort of traveling over to the right a little bit. Now this line is going to be, it's basically going to be this line here. I'm going to keep the line sort of there. Okay, roughly, that's roughly where it's going to be. So the top of my the bottom of my top lip, that crease, I'm going to do slightly just on the line, just slightly over it. I'm going to do about there because that will give me space for the open mouth. And then I'm just going to start looking. I'm looking at where it travels because it sort of travels down. There's a little bit of a sort of a change of direction there as it comes down a bit steeper than it does there. And on that side, it's kind of similar. So I'm going to just bring this down. I'm looking as I'm drawing, and look how slowly I'm drawing. If I tried to do that really quickly, probably won't draw it very accurately because I'm drawing it quicker than I'm being able to sort of identify what should be where. So I'm going to sort of keep it about there. I think that's there. That's what I've drawn to there. Now, on this side, it's going to be pretty similar. So use your line of symmetry to help you just, sort of identify how far along that should be. Now, you can either do it by eye, as I'm sort of just about to do, or if you're not sure, you can measure it. So you can measure it with a ruler and then just make sure it's the same on either side. If you don't have access to a ruler like I haven't at the moment, I'm just going to use my pencil. So I'm going to put the very tip of my pencil on the edge of there. Then I'm going to just put my fingernail just on that line of symmetry. Make sure it's not over or underneath it. It's right on that line of symmetry. And then I'm just going to bring that over. That's where that is. So it's actually a little over where I originally was going to draw my line. So that's how you can measure to make sure that things are accurate. And the same on either side. So the lips are going to come over a little bit more. I'm not sure yet how far I'm going to draw them yet. I'm going to make that decision after I do the top lip, I think. So looking at this gap, my bottom lip is going to roughly sit probably here. So the bottom lip's got this little sort of shape here, and it's actually slightly off center on this one. but I'm going to just put that off center just like that a little bit. And the top lip, so what I'm trying to decide now is where should the top lip start? Should it up here, down here? So look at the thickness of the lips. Everybody's lips are different. So, you know, look at your picture and identify how thick you need to do your lips. Starting on the line of symmetry here, because that's the easiest place to start. I'm just going to do a bit at a time on both sides, because if I drew one side, it would be quite hard for me to get the other side. So I'm looking at what I'm drawing so far. Yeah, I think I'm all right with that. That starts to peak here, and I want to do the same on either side. So if you're not sure, you can measure it. Let's bring that over like that. You can sort of draw a line across the top just to make sure that they're both even, or you can just sort of sit back and look at it and just to see how the sort of shape is looking. Now I'm going to look at the shape of this line here. So it sort of comes round, it's quite gentle. Some people sort of come in and around, some people go more round. This one sort of comes in, and this lip doesn't seem to finish right at the end. It sort of comes in and sort of fades into the bottom of the lip there. So that's what I'm going to sort of do there. And I'm going to, that bit there. So that's this bit here. So I've come in a bit steep there. So the outer corner of my lip's probably going to be around about here-ish. So I'm just going to draw that in like that. I'm going to sit back and look at that. That looks all right so far. Now, I hadn't decided where the outer corner of those lips are going to be, and I've got this little bit here I want to make sure I don't forget as well, you know, with there. So I'm going to measure it again from there to here. So just put the end of my pencil on there, put my finger or my nail on that center line of symmetry, pull it over. So this lip's going to end roughly about here. And the shape is going to be roughly the same on this side as well. So I'm just going to sort of bring this down quite loosely. Now, I haven't mirrored it, as you can see, so I need to just adjust that. I'm just going to turn my paper so it's a bit more comfortable to work. And then I'll use my rubber just to rub out the line that's not quite right. All right, so before I do anything else, I'm going to stop and look at what I've done so far and identify if I'm happy with that or not. So far I think that looks all right. Now I'm going to mark in the bottom of my lip. At the moment I haven't paid too much detail to actually how this looks yet, or I've thought about that a little bit, but I'm not 100% sure if I've got it right yet, but I'll come back to that in a minute. So the bottom lip, if we look at this picture, is quite a bit thicker than the top lip. So I need to make sure on my drawing my bottom lip is thicker than my top lip. So again, you can sort of measure that to that using the same technique by just, measuring that and, hang on, there we go, and try not to touch it this time, and measure it against the bottom one, and you can do a similar thing. My drawing's bigger than that, so I'm not going to measure that to that, but you can sort of see how big that is in relation to the bottom of the lip. Once I've identified roughly how far down my lip's going to go, the next thing I need to think about is not just draw that in, I need to look at the shape that the lips have created, that bottom lip. So as it comes up and round, it sort of comes in, not as steep as that one, so there, that line's not quite right there, what I've done. It's kind of like that, I think. Sorry about that first line I did. So I think it's something like that. I'm going to take a step right. Now I'm looking at that now, and I think I need to do the bottom lip bigger, but I'm going to make that decision in a minute. That lip comes up like that. So I'm going to look at that now and make some little adjustments. So I'm just going to compare the size of this part of the lip to the bottom, and my bottom lip is bigger, but I'm going to probably just make my bottom lip a little bit bigger. So it's worth spending time adjusting, changing, making little adjustments. Don't just go with the first thing that you draw, because the chances are not quite right. It's not quite what you want. Just also want to be careful it doesn't go too steep up there. So that's roughly my shape. So now I'm just going to refine it. So I'm going to rub out my guideline, because I don't need that anymore. And I'm going to rub out that line of symmetry, because I definitely don't need that anymore. And now I'm going to draw in how these lips join here. So that top lip sort of comes in like that, and then it sort of goes up again there. And then this one sort of again does the same thing here, so it comes down a bit, then it goes up a bit here into sort of this corner, and it sort of turns down slightly, but that will probably be with the shading when we add shading. And then the teeth, they're going to be on that line of symmetry, and if I look at the shape of them, they do meet that bottom lip almost. There's a bit of a gap there, and I can only see that one, and then there's a tiny bit of a tooth there, but that's going to be mostly shaded away. And then this tooth goes like that, and again you want to make sure both of these teeth are the same size. You don't want to end up with one big tooth and one little tooth, because that won't look quite right. Okay, see, I've just made mine a little bit bigger there. So that's basically how you draw. Now again, tiny little tweaks that you might need to do here and there. This side, yeah, I can see a bit of tooth there, just a very little bit of tooth there. So once you've got your shape and you're happy with your shape and your overall drawing, the next stage is going to be to start shading it to make it look 3D. So what you need to be thinking about is the highlights. So if we look, usually bottom lips are larger and rounder than the top lips, and they stick out more. So they usually catch more highlights, as you can see here. The top lip's got a bit of highlight, but not as much as the bottom, and definitely not as bright as the bottom highlight. There's also a lot more shadow underneath the top lip. If we look at the top lip, there's a darker shadow in the corner, and then there's a mid shadow here, and then it's kind of stays similar on this side. This side's got a darker shadow than this side. On the bottom lips, you've got your shadows in the corner, because your lips are rounded, they come out, don't they, towards you. So you're going to get more light hitting here, which means you're going to have some shadow in the corners, and there's a bit of shadow just underneath the lips there, and then you've got your shadow on the face as well. So those are the things that you need to be thinking about, where your light, mids and darks are. The darkest part of this picture is the corners and just inside the mouth there. Okay, so those are the darkest bits, so they need to be the darkest bits on yours. The other thing you need to think about when you're shading your lips is these creases on your lips. Now your lips, obviously, as they move, when you talk and you eat, your lips, they have to stretch. So when they're closed, usually you can see all of these creases. So that's what you want to show on your drawing to make that look realistic. So I'm going to start by showing you how I draw in the creases. So normally I'd start in the middle perhaps, because these middle creases are pretty straightforward, they just go down. So if I drew that one in, it sort of goes down like that. I can't see lines going the whole way down because some of the shading is going to hide that, so I'm just going to roughly mark them in. Then as you come over here, you can see the creases. They're not dead straight like that, they're curved slightly, okay? And that's because, again, your lips, they come out and then they go back in. So the creases are going to sort of represent that shape. So as you come down towards the inside of your mouth, they're going to appear rounder and rounder until you get into the corners there. So I've just drawn a few there just quite quickly just to show you the shape, but you might want to spend a bit more time than I have just sort of looking at how the creases sit. It's up to you whether you want to go into the detail of where the creases split. That's kind of up to you. I'm not going to go into that much detail for this. And then on this side, it's the opposite way around, because as the creases go in towards this corner of the mouth, the creases are more like a sort of like a C shape. So it's really important to help to give your picture the illusion that it's 3D and your lips are sort of coming out and they're nice and round. These lines will really help you give that impression that your lips are round. Top lip is exactly the same. We've got a crease here that comes up, but again, I'm not going to sort of sit and draw them all in perfectly at this point. What I want to show you is sort of the direction that the creases should be. So as I'm drawing them in, on this side, they're like brackets almost. So you've got like open brackets, closed brackets. So sometimes it might be easier to think of it like that. The ones in the middle are pretty straight because they're just right in front of you. And as they come around to this side, you've got your open brackets, and these lines will help you give you that sort of 3D effect. And then it's just a case of building up the shade. So again, you might want to start with the darkest areas first perhaps, just because, if you're not sure where to start, it really doesn't matter where you start, but if you're not sure where to start, I'd recommend start with the darkest areas. I'm just going to do some very loose crosshatch sketching just to sort of show you how I'd build it up. Try and do it quickly. So I've got some shadow under here. So I'm just going to do this really quickly and loosely, but just to show you where I'd add shadow. But what I would do is I'd spend time sort of going over some of these creases. At this point I'm still using a B pencil, and if all you have is a B pencil, then that's fine. You could do this whole thing using the B pencil. As you can see, I can get some pretty dark shading with this B pencil if I press down hard. But if you do have different gradient pencils, it just makes life easier if you move between them for doing light bits and darker bits. And I'm just building up now some of the shading on this lip, just starting with the darkest areas. If you're worried about working dark, then you can just do it lighter first. I've just moved on to a 6B. So you can start by just pressing down really lightly, and then you can always go darker over the top of it as you go. Make sure you pay attention to the shape of this bottom lip as you draw, so you don't accidentally sort of lose the shape that you just drew. You don't want to sort of accidentally sort of scribble over it and lose it. There's a little tooth in there that you can see. It's actually a little bit lighter in there, but I'm just going to leave it like that for now. I might go back and rub it out afterwards, or might just leave it. And then I'd probably darken this slightly in here because this is quite dark. It gets a little lighter here, but then it goes dark again in this sort of corner over here. So that's how I would recommend that you build up your tones of your lips. And as you shade, just make sure that you do some directional shading, okay? So some contour shading. So what that means is, I'm just going to move this as I work. I like to move the paper around as I work. What contour shading means is that you're shading in the direction that you the shape is. So these lips are round, so I'm making sure that my shading appears round as well. And just bear in mind, I need to leave lots of highlights on this bottom lip, but at the bottom there is some shadow, so I'm going to build that up little bit at a time. Okay. Right, I'm going to pretty much leave it there because I've explained everything that you need to know. So just sort of continue working, the detail, looking at the creases, looking at what you're doing, adding in your light, mid and dark tones, using a rubber if you need to bring back highlights. You can use a cotton bud if you need to sort of add some blending perhaps if you want to. Just be careful if you use a cotton bud not to over blend, but get the general idea. So that's basically what I would suggest you do. And again, to get a really good drawing, I've spent 17 minutes on this demonstration. If I wanted to make this look good, I'd probably spend a good hour on it and really sort of focus on looking at where light, mid, dark tones are, looking at where the highlights are, using a rubber if needed, and just building it up bit at a time, starting with light and then slowly getting darker and darker over the top.